Fantasy fiction has long since been the genre of the hero. After all, it is the medium through which we're able to ask the big questions, and heroes, from Beowulf to Batman, have acted as really excellent focal points for finding the big answers. What values do our cultures hold dear? What is it that we admire in a person? What does it mean to be a hero? It's unsurprising, then, that the father of contemporary fantasy, J.R.R. Tolkien, wrote a fair number of heroic characters. But what I find really interesting is, well, the fact that he wrote a fair number of heroic characters. There is no singular protagonist. There is no one exemplary character that we should look at as purely heroic. Rather, Tolkien creates a whole range of heroic characters, from the traditional warrior to the humble traveler. These little points of reference that are interesting on their own, but when you take a step back to see all of them within the context of the story, it paints a remarkably nuanced landscape of what heroism is, what it has been, and perhaps what it could become. Now, do make sure you stick around to the end of this video, because I'm going to be making some announcements about this upcoming year of videos on this channel, and also stick around to hear me talk about this video's sponsor, ZocDoc. I don't know if you've heard, but it is officially a new year, and this year I've decided to make it my personal goal to prioritize my health, and that means getting myself in to see a doctor. The problem with that is that I hate making phone calls, my schedule's a mess, and my insurance baffles me, so I've been putting off my New Year's resolution. But, thanks to this video's sponsor, ZocDoc, I was able to find a doctor, get an appointment made, and start prioritizing my health in 2026. ZocDoc is a free website where you can search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. From primary care to dentistry, eye care and skincare, and nearly everything in between. With more than 150,000 healthcare providers across all 50 states, ZocDoc makes it easy to book in-network appointments for whatever type of care you need. From primary care to dental health, eye care to urgent care to mental health and more. It's the one-stop shop for all of your healthcare needs. And there's no need to call doctor's offices and wait on hold either. ZocDoc allows you to do everything online. With ZocDoc, you can filter for doctors by insurance, location, and specialties, and see reviews by real verified patients, so that you can get the best, most convenient care for you. And when you found the doctor you need, you can see their actual appointment openings. Plus, ZocDoc helps you get appointments fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking, and you can even make same-day appointments. So what are you waiting for? Stop guessing around with your health and get yourself the care that you need. Just go to ZocDoc.com/JessOfTheShire to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/JessOfTheShire to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. Thank you so much to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to it. At a glance, The Lord of the Rings and the world that Tolkien created may seem fairly simple. It has long been criticized as being a very black and white way of looking at things, with very little gray areas in between, and this is true in a way. Characters like Gandalf are always going to be good. A character like Sauron is always going to be bad. The tension of the story does not derive from whether or not these fundamental things are going to change, and many of Tolkien's characters are quite singular in their motivation. And yet, especially in the way that he builds his heroic characters, I find that Tolkien often utilizes the device of having two characters that are at opposite ends of a spectrum. They are fixed points. But in between these two characters, in the dialogue, in the conversation, in the way that the story treats these characters, we can find all of those interesting gray nuances that you don't see in the individual characters. Take, for example, the tension between Boromir and Faramir. Boromir is absolutely a warrior of the old world. More than any other characters we meet in the series, he is bold and brash. Like the ancient warrior Beowulf, throwing himself at a dragon rather than risking anyone else's life, Boromir succeeds and stumbles because he is fueled by a warrior's pride. His younger brother, Faramir, however, is a much more modern type of soldier. His triumphs come from secrecy and stealth, from wisdom and planning rather than bravery and passion. These are basically polar opposite character types, and yet, by looking at the way that the story treats these stories, the way that their character stories are told, we can learn a lot about the way that heroism and the model of heroism has changed over time, and what utility the old model might have in the new world. Boromir epitomizes the Old English concept of offer mode. This is a word that most famously appears in the 10th century poem The Battle of Maldon, and it's used to describe the story's protagonist, the Anglo-Saxon warlord Byrhtnoth. The poem describes the choice that Byrhtnoth made in the Battle of Maldon. He had the option to put his opponents at a disadvantage, to attack them before they had made it to shore and were fully ready to fight, to secure himself an easy victory and save many lives. But Byrhtnoth was a warrior of the old world, and he wanted a fair fight and a good story more than he wanted to guarantee himself victory. So he allowed his opponents to come onto shore to face him in a fair fight, and he and all of his men were crushed and killed. Offer mode is an excess of spirit. It's an excess of pride. It's something that makes for a really excellent hero, a really dramatic story, but as Tolkien explored in an essay on the subject of offer mode, it can also result in a lot of unnecessary bloodshed. To the pre-Christian world, where salvation wasn't an option, a life fueled by burning offer mode seemed to be all that a warrior could hope for. A hero was defined as someone who rallied against fate, someone who refused to accept the loss that was going to be thrust upon him, someone that understood the world was crashing down around them, and yet continued swinging their sword. This is the kind of hero that Boromir is when he enters the Council of Elrond. He's arrived because he and his brother have received a dream that says that doom is near at hand, and upon seeing the ring, he says, "Is then the doom of Minas Tirith come at last?" He's not asking if there's anything they can do to prevent this, not if the ring might help them in some way. He's asking if doom has come at last, as if doom, as if defeat, was an inevitable outcome. And yet, Boromir is not going to take this lying down. Like Byrhtnoth on the eve of his death, Boromir says, "Gondor stands, and even at the end of its strength, is still very strong." This beautifully echoes the words of one of Byrhtnoth's men as reported in the Battle of Maldon. He cries out on the battlefield before his doom, "Heart shall be bolder, harder be purpose, more proud the spirit as our power lessens. Mind shall not falter, nor mood waver, though doom shall come and dark conquer." Boromir's willingness to stand up and fight in the face of this onslaught of doom is remarkable. It's princely, and to someone like his father Denethor, who shares the same worldview as his son, it is amazingly inspirational. But the problem is that this mindset, this form of heroism, is built on the perspective that doom is inevitable, that failure is oncoming. And in the Christian-inspired world of Middle-earth, that's simply not true. Tolkien explains where offer mode often goes wrong. This element of pride, in the form of the desire for honor and glory in life and after death, tends to grow, to become a chief motive, driving a man beyond the bleak heroic necessities to excess. Byrhtnoth was chivalrous rather than strictly heroic. Honor was in itself a motive, and he sought it at the risk of placing all the men most dear to him in a truly heroic situation, which they could redeem only by death. Magnificent, perhaps, but certainly wrong. Tolkien believed in salvation. He believed that notoriety, that making your life a good story, was not the only calling of human life. He believed that rather than dying in a blaze of glory, it was more heroic to live another day, to go home to your children, to struggle to your next meal, and to be good rather than just making for a good story. While a brilliant spark flashing suddenly in the dark one moment and being gone the next may be more noticeable, that's something you tell someone about, the slowly burning ember in the hearth will ultimately produce far more heat. Boromir's pessimistic man versus world, glory above all else mentality is not healthy. And this, on top of the stress that he's under, on top of the temptation of the ring, makes him especially ripe for corruption. And in his conversation with Frodo, as he's begging him for the ring, trying to take it by force, we can see the very toxic places that this thinking leads to. The fearless, the ruthless, these alone will achieve victory. What could not a warrior do in this hour? A great leader? What could not Aragorn do? Or, if he refuses, why not Boromir? The ring would give me power of command. How I would drive the hosts of Mordor, and all men would flock to my banner. Boromir's plan to use the ring to wage all-out war would have ended in catastrophe. Sure, the plan with Frodo is a little bit ambitious, sending a halfling to Mount Doom to destroy the ring. It sounds a little bit crazy, but the risk is ultimately lower. Boromir's proposed plan would risk thousands of lives, and due to the corruption of the ring, it almost inevitably would have ended in failure. But, caged in by the old heroic mode, he's incapable of realizing how rife with failure this plan is. Or perhaps he does realize it, but without an alternative way of being, he plans to sacrifice himself and thousands of other lives to failure and to loss, because at the very least, it would make for a very good story. But the problem is that there is an alternative, one embodied by Boromir's brother, Faramir. Faramir cuts a distinctly modern figure, one that seemed to emerge almost accidentally from Tolkien's mind. Tolkien recalled of Faramir's introduction, "A new character has come on the scene. I am sure I did not invent him, I did not even want him, though I like him. But there he came, walking into the woods of Ithilien, Faramir, the brother of Boromir." Tolkien had been raised on a steady diet of this old world heroism, but he'd had his perceptions of what it meant to be a hero and a warrior completely shattered by his experiences in the First World War. Changes in technology and the scale and scope of war had made the warrior of the ancient world largely irrelevant. No longer were individual heroes responsible for rallying pride and winning battles. War had become a machine, one that would chew up an individual and spit them out, no matter how much offermode they bore. Tolkien once referred to the animal horror of trench warfare. And indeed, it seemed that in this new landscape of war, there was no place for the warrior, only the beast. And the thing was that the stories of the old warriors had always been a romanticized version of what war really was. War has always contained death, it has always contained pain. But due to just how much the structure and process of conflict had changed in the 20th century, the old warrior no longer offered the assurance, the inspiration, or the comfort that the modern soldier needed. It seemed almost impossible to have a glorious and resistant attitude against things like mustard gas, trench fever, and sepsis. Beorhtnoth may have found heroic value in his dramatic beheading at the hand of the enemy, but the modern soldier could no longer look to him as a perfect role model. Thus, with the stories of the old world stewing around his mind, the character of Faramir emerged, almost as a necessity. From the very introduction of his character, we can tell that Faramir is a foil to Boromir. While his brother was loud and brash and assertive, he is soft-spoken and gentle. He's described in terms of his commanding face and the keen wit in his searching gaze, rather than as tall and proud like his brother. He doesn't make speeches and lecture in the same way that Boromir did, Rather, he seems much more open to listening, to a conversation. And in sharp contrast to Boromir's claim that only the fearless and ruthless will achieve victory, Faramir says, "War must be while we defend our lives against a destroyer who would devour all, but I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only that which they defend, the city of the men of Númenor. And I would have her loved for her memory, her ancientry, her beauty, and her present wisdom, not feared, save as men may fear the dignity of a man, old and wise." To this new version of the soldier, war itself is of no value. Faramir doesn't want to find individual glory on the battlefield, but he wants to become an individual that is part of a society that will not be feared or hated by the people it has defeated in battle, but a society that can foster wisdom and care and love far into the future, past that one individual life. He's not fueled by the violent flame of Offermode, but rather by a humility that understands that the individual life is better spent quietly working towards peace than boldly burning out in the face of doom. And with all of this in mind, it might be quite tempting to think that Tolkien was choosing a side here. Boromir was wrong, and Faramir was right. But it's never quite so simple. For all of his very many flaws, you can't say that Boromir's death was not dramatic, tragic, noble, and so beautiful. It is one of the most profound sacrifices in the entire trilogy, in my opinion. He's the kind of person that is all in 100% of the time. He earnestly fails, and he earnestly seeks redemption. He begs for forgiveness, and in the end, he even comes around to realize that Aragorn might have a chance of saving his people. And like it or not, Boromir's heroic sacrifice did make for a beautiful story. His death is one of the things that propels the Fellowship to separate, to follow the paths that they must follow in order to achieve victory. Due to all of his flaws and all of his mistakes, Boromir's character is accessible in a way that not many other characters in this story are. He feels so richly human somehow, in a way that a perfect character like Gandalf or Aragorn does not feel. And, well, you gotta admit that there is a reason that the epic heroes of the old world have stuck around so much. There's something in the scope and grandeur of these tales that connects with us on a very human level. There is value to be found in the idea of fighting all the harder as your power lessens. If loss is inevitable, if death is looming, then shouldn't a hero fight anyway, going down with his sword raised? And if we take a look at the way that the story talks about Boromir posthumously, I think it becomes clear that Tolkien did not mean to solely condemn this type of character. Even just hours or really minutes after his betrayal, Aragorn and Legolas, who know well of the ways in which Boromir has failed, they praise him. They mourn his death. They call him Boromir the Bold, Boromir the Fair. Many readers may initially denounce Boromir as mostly just an antagonist, but Tolkien gently guides us to a far less settled position. Yes, perhaps the Offermode of the old world no longer has the use and power that it once did in our very changed world. But that doesn't mean that the pride and power of the old world should be completely done away with. It doesn't mean that we can't have any room in our hearts for the tales of heroism from the old world. Just because the world has changed, it doesn't mean that history has lost all of its value. It is not incidental that these two characters are brothers, because these two versions of heroism are inextricably linked. Faramir would not have been able to become the gentle and measured soul that he was without the example set by his brother, teaching him how he should be and also how he should not be. And for all we know, Boromir may very well have been propelled further and further into this unhealthy level of Offermode by the presence of his brother, by his father desperately pushing him to be less and less like Faramir. These two absolutely different versions of the hero are, at the heart, entangled. unable to exist without the pressure or the precedent of the other. In The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien wanted to tell the kind of tale that could span all the ages. And this meant understanding and being in conversation with the stories of the old world, even as we strive into the new. Living at the very volatile and scary time that he did, Tolkien understood more than most the ways in which the world had changed and was fundamentally different from the way that it was before, but he was also mindful of the fact that history was close at hand, and you should not disrespect or forget it, lest you repeat it. But the pages of storytelling history were not the only thing informing the types of heroes that Tolkien created, and in the dichotomy between Aragorn and Frodo, we can see him reaching into what a hero is capable of, and how that varies between person to person. Aragorn is, without a doubt, the most traditionally heroic out of all of Tolkien's heroes. He fits all of the traditional story beats perfectly. He is the long-lost heir to the great kingdom, emerging from obscurity at a time of need to become the perfect leader. He falls in love with the princess and must win her father's approval. He even has a magic sword and magic healing hands. He's basically like every trope from Siegfried's story to King Arthur and beyond brought to life. He is the classic epic hero. Frodo is not that. If anything, he's more in line with the fairy tale protagonist of the Victorian story. During the Victorian era, the concept of the hero underwent some radical reconstruction. They had realized at this point that the epic hero wasn't exactly accessible for the everyday person. No one looks at a character like Aragorn and thinks, oh yeah, that guy is just like me. Except Viggo Mortensen, probably, but he's a special exception. Rather, through non-traditional, scrappy protagonists, the Victorians stumbled their way into a new version of the hero. These were people that were definitely not of noble birth, secret or otherwise. They didn't get to have conventional love stories. They didn't have much magic to help them out, just their contemporary wits. And this is the tradition that Frodo descends from. He is literally a small hero, both in stature and ambition. When he decides to take the ring out of the Shire, it's not out of a desire to save the world, but just out of a desire to keep the Shire safe, if that's even possible. Even Frodo's quest is hardly traditional. He's not trying to ascend a throne, he's not even trying to win something, he is literally trying to throw something away. And contrary to the arc of the classical hero, Frodo remains relatively unchanged by the events of the story. It is pivotal to his character, in fact, that he remains a very small, very weak hobbit at the center of all of these great events. Frodo never becomes a genius sword fighter or learns of his secret magic powers. He never makes a name for himself. Rather, his smallness and his humility is the very reason that he's there. His journey is not one of becoming any sort of a recognizable hero, but rather realizing that even someone like him is capable of heroic bravery when the situation demands it. He is to become a vessel through which greatness is achieved. When he accepts the burden of the ring at the Council of Elrond, the passage reads, "At last, with an effort, he spoke, and wondered to hear his own words, as if some other will was using his small voice." Aragorn, by contrast, has a completely different arc. He is a big voice that must learn to amplify itself, to be heard by all. Aragorn spends much of the story flying under the radar, pretending to be Strider, not allowing his will to dominate the others in his party. He is no Boromir, overeager to assert his power. Rather, his gentle process of growth is one that's fueled by friendship, by companionship, by learning what it means to be a king from the people and the world around him. He loves and loses, he forms new friendships, and he reinforces old. He learns that his hands are capable of both hurting and healing, and that perhaps leadership means knowing when to use which hand. And in the end, we see that Aragorn succeeds, while Frodo most definitely fails. At the crucial moment, his strength gives way and he surrenders to the temptation of the ring. But I do think that we have to ask the question if this failure means that Frodo is no longer heroic. Because if we're looking at it honestly, this failure is kind of the entire reason that he succeeded. You could call it destiny, you could call it narrativium, or you could call it God, but something happened that meant that Frodo putting himself in the place where Gollum was able to take the ring meant that the ring was able to be destroyed. In spite of Frodo's failure, or really arguably because of it, the quest was able to succeed. This isn't a job that someone of greater stature, like Faramir or Aragorn, could have done. Frodo needed to be the perfect combination of both hardy and weak. He needed to be able to get himself to the place where he needed to be, and then he needed to fail. And perhaps most importantly, Frodo needed to be gentle enough that Gollum would be there to finish the job. It was Frodo's mercy, his prioritization of healing and forgiveness, that meant that Gollum was able to be there in that exact moment, alive at Samath Naur. Tolkien explains, "Isn't the failure of Frodo a more significant and real event than a mere fairy story ending in which the hero is indomitable? Is it possible for the good, even the saintly, to be subjected to a power of evil which is too great for them to overcome in themselves? In this case, the cause, not the hero, was triumphant, because by the exercise of pity, mercy, and forgiveness of injury, a situation was produced in which all was redressed and disaster averted." Through the character of Frodo, Tolkien proves that by upturning and re-examining traditional heroic ideals, by re-examining the structure of the quest itself, we open up ourselves to explore a whole new dimension of what it means to be a hero, both on a societal and an individual level. For people who are so utterly different, like Frodo and Aragorn, being a hero is going to mean something very different for each of them. Aragorn was meant to be big, to be seen, and to lead, and to fight, and to find massive, catastrophic victory. But Frodo was never meant for that kind of victory. He wasn't meant to lead, or even really to fight. He was meant to hold true to who he was, and to what he held dear. He was meant to not necessarily be great in himself, but to be the bearer and the tool of greatness. And I think that it is telling that out of the two of these heroes, one is obviously intended to be more relatable than the other. We're not supposed to necessarily see ourselves in Aragorn, but to aspire to be more like him. We're supposed to do everything in our personal capacity to become even half the lover, the leader, and the king that he was. Aragorn portrays the kind of greatness that you aspire to, even if you will never necessarily achieve the heights of his triumph. But I think that in the character of Frodo, we find a model for the kindness and the mercy that we should grant ourselves when these aspirations inevitably fall short. We find the powerful grace that can be learned from humility and mercy. We see the ways in which small everyday acts of goodness and kindness can compile together to do something more beautiful than any of us could imagine on an individual level. Through Frodo, we can see the way that, as Tolkien put it, we are here surviving because of the indomitable courage of quite small people against impossible odds. Heroism can be the kind that Aragorn personifies, but it can also be something much smaller, much more frightening, and much more humbling. But perhaps the most interesting of Tolkien's heroes to me are the heroes that aren't even trying to be heroes at all. Uncontroversially, Samwise Gamgee ends up being a very heroic character in this story, but possibly controversially, I would say that his counterpoint heroic character is actually Gollum. After all, what is a hero but someone that stands steadfastly by what they believe, and someone who allows goodness to come about the world? Sure, you can say that Gollum's ideals and techniques are a little bit unconventional, but it is an undeniable truth that without his role in the story, the ring would not have been destroyed. You can argue that Gollum is a villain. that he does do some rather unwholesome and selfish things in this story. But I would say that his only real sin is a very human kind of selfishness. Before his encounter with the ring, Smeagol isn't described as being a reprehensible or evil person, or even disliked. He's described as curious-minded and inquisitive, the kind of person that wants to dive into the secrets of the earth itself. He was not evil in the beginning, and I would argue that he never becomes the kind of evil, the kind of unrepentant evil that a character like Sauron is. Gollum was just small-minded and selfish and impulsive, and he just so happened to have the misfortune of falling into a trap far larger than he could have possibly imagined. And for all of his many weaknesses, Gollum demonstrates a very particular kind of strength that we don't find in anyone else in Middle-earth. After all, he held onto the ring for hundreds of years, and although it turned him inward and brought his worst impulses to the surface, Gollum kept the ring safe from the enemy's hands far larger than anyone else could. He outright refuses to give into the larger temptation to surrender the ring to its master, and yes, this is a selfishly motivated thing, he wants the ring for himself, but all the same, the result of his actions are good. And I do think there is something so tragically heroic about the fact that even after these hundreds of years of loneliness and pain and corruption, when he spends time with Frodo and Sam, with the goodness of Frodo and Sam, we see Gollum start to soften. One night he sits up and watches Frodo and Sam sleep, and a fleeting but very telling moment passes. Could one of the sleepers have seen him, they would have thought that they beheld an old, weary hobbit, shrunken by the years that had carried him far beyond his time, beyond friends and kin, and the fields and streams of youth. An old, starved, pitiable thing. Gollum was never beyond the possibility of redemption. He was never painted as flatly evil like a character like Morgoth became. And this figure that he cuts, a shadow wavering over the possibility of goodness, is counterbalanced by the character of Sam, a fundamentally good character whose inherent weaknesses often lead him to doing bad and cruel things. In that moment that I described earlier, when Gollum watches Frodo and Sam sleep, any possibility that Gollum may have had at healing after this moment is brutally cut short by Sam, who wakes up and sees Gollum watching them, and snaps at him, pushing him away and calling him a villain. Tolkien calls this the most tragic moment in all of the trilogy, and I can see why. Because it's not like Sam intended to be cruel to Gollum. It's not like he ever said, "No, I don't want you to become a better person," but his small-minded, unnecessary cruelty, his selfish love of Frodo, means that he ruined Gollum's chances at redemption. Despite his very many admirable qualities, even Tolkien admits that Samwise Gamgee can be narrow-minded, he can be overconfident at times, and he can be a bit conceited. He doesn't like to have his beliefs challenged, he thinks that he knows more than he really does, and he makes assumptions based on far too little information. And just like Gollum, it's not like Sam has come along on the quest because he wants to save the world, because he has these great heroic aspirations. He's just there because he wants to keep his precious safe, Frodo. And while this love for Frodo is far more constructive than Gollum's obsession with the ring, I think that it's fair to say that part of Sam's resentment towards Gollum may come from a kind of uncomfortable familiarity. He sees how much Gollum is like him, and his only reaction to that is not to examine this further, not to dive deeper, not to find sympathy for Gollum, but to violently push him away. There is darkness in the character of Sam. It is far outweighed by how great he is, how good of a person he is. But the fact is that he and Gollum walk a very similar line. Neither Sam nor Gollum came into this operation with the idea of being heroic. When Frodo tells Sam that people might tell stories of Samwise the Stout-Hearted, he dismisses his words as teasing. Gollum's fractured mind seems incapable of recognizing the story that he's playing a part in. And yet, by clinging tightly to the things that they love, both of these characters end up in positions where they are doing things that would be considered heroic. Sam keeps Frodo alive for weeks, sustaining him both physically and spiritually. After Frodo seemingly dies in Shelob's lair, Sam takes the ring and carries on the quest, not out of a desire to save the world, not for the sake of the fellowship that he remembers, but for the sake of his friend. When it is all finished and the ring is destroyed and fire is raining down upon them, Sam's first thought is not of the victory that they've achieved for the world, not of their impending death, but just for Frodo. He notices Frodo's burden was taken away. There was the dear master of the sweet days in the Shire. "Master!" cried Sam, and fell upon his knees. In all that ruin of the world, for the moment he felt only joy. Great joy. The burden was gone. His master had been saved. He was himself again. He was free. Sam's focus, his intent, was never on the end goal, and yet without his ceaseless help and care, the quest never would have succeeded. Gollum, as well, is certainly not there in the hopes of the ring's destruction, but he plays a pivotal part in that process. He was the one to guide Frodo and Sam to Mordor. His actions and behaviors provide a warning of what was to come if Frodo gave in to his impulses. And intentionally or not, Gollum was the one who took the ring from Frodo and ensured its destruction. And for all we know, there was a part of Gollum, a little back corner of his mind, one that he didn't even recognize, that wanted to destroy the ring. Teetering as he was on the edge of the chasm, who's to say that Gollum was not the one who provided that final push, who realized that destroying this ring and himself was the only way for them all to be saved? In the end, we can't know what it was that Gollum was thinking, and he was rather lost to his madness. But as Frodo acknowledges, "But for Gollum, Sam, I could not have destroyed the ring. The quest would have been in vain, even at the bitter end. So let us forgive him." These accidental heroes are the most fascinating to me, because out of all of these characters, I would say that Sam and Gollum are intended to be the most relatable. We've all been Sam. We've all been kind of in the sidekick role. We're not really there for the reason that everyone else is. We just want to make sure that the people we love are safe and healthy. And, as difficult as it is to admit, I'm sure that we have also all been Gollums. As Elizabeth Arthur puts it, Gollum demands the sympathy of every reader. He has two sides to him, one representing life and goodness, the other death and evil, and the battle which those two sides engage in is heartbreakingly close to the battle we all engage in, and the one which is portrayed in any character in a good piece of modern, non-fantastic fiction. In this world, there are no goblins or orcs, nor any Aragorns or Gandalfs either, but there are certainly a lot of Gollums. Some days, we are quite a bit like Samwise Gamgee. Perhaps even more days we're a little bit Gollum-esque. But I hope that most of us can take comfort in the idea that even at our smallest, even at our most cruel and low and petty, we can still be a part of something good. If we, on an individual level, do our best, if we surround ourselves with the right people, if we keep picking ourselves up and trying even after we fail, a good ending might be possible. Existing in the online Tolkien space as I do, it can be a little frustrating for me to hear over and over again the refrain that Sam is actually the real hero of The Lord of the Rings. And that's not because Sam isn't a heroic character, but because I think it paints the story with far too simple of a brush. Tolkien wasn't interested in telling a story that hung entirely off of the shoulders of one uber hero. He was trying to cobble together a kaleidoscope of different role models and examples of people we should be like and people that we should perhaps not be like. He was piecing together time and space, capturing the fullness of the human experience in the mirror of fantasy. There is no real hero in The Lord of the Rings because they are all both heroes sometimes and oftentimes failures. Tolkien was a complex man living at a complex time. He understood very well that the values of the old world might not necessarily be the exact values we need in the modern world, but that we could not forget the way that things used to be, the things that got us to where we are today. He knew all too well the power of victory and the heart-wrenching beauty that can be found in failure. He had long since realized the power of stories, not just to inspire and to inflame, but to comfort and to guide. The Lord of the Rings was never written to be prescriptive or allegorical. It is not a how-to guide on how to live your life. Rather, Tolkien wanted to present us with the full range of possibilities that he had seen within the human experience. He didn't want to tell us how exactly to live our lives, but rather to show us what was possible, what we could be capable of if only we opened our hearts to recognize the ways in which even the smallest, most unheroic person could change the course of the future. Let me know in the comments who your favorite hero in The Lord of the Rings is. There's a lot I wasn't able to talk about in this video, like Denethor and Éowyn especially, and I know everyone loves Faramir, but the more that I grow older, the more that I love Gollum in all of his complexity and all of his moral nuance, so, you know, let me know who your favorite is. Be sure to share this video with someone you think would enjoy it, and give it a like if you enjoyed it, and do consider subscribing to tune in to hear me talk about The Lord of the Rings and other stuff. Now on to that announcement that I mentioned. From here on forward, I am only going to be putting out a video once every 2 weeks. That means that most months there will be 2 videos, but sometimes there will also be 3. This is just going to give me a little bit more time to work on the parts of the process of video making that I really love, the writing and research part of it, rather than just trying to turn out a video because I have a deadline. I've always found that the videos that I spend a little more time on the writing and research, I like them better, I'm more satisfied with them, and you guys also watch them more, so I don't think it's worth me continuing at the pace that I am if everyone seems to be in agreement that it would be better if I slowed down. I will admit that this is a little bit scary for me because the pace that I've been creating videos at has really worked for me, and it's really scary to abandon something that's been working for so long, but I can't do it forever. And I think that now is the time. So I hope that you guys are patient with me as we go through this adjustment period. Looking at the schedule that I have set for myself in the upcoming year, I'm gonna have so much time to work on the projects that I always just put off until I had more time to work on stuff, including some stuff outside of just video essays. Thank you for joining me this year, the last year, and in the year to come, and I hope that you have a very happy, hobbity day.